Hey YouTube, JoeBoy here. So, because of the way that I'm probably going to title this video, huge spoiler warning to anyone who only watches the One Piece anime. This will be a manga related theory, but today we want to talk more about Luffy versus Katakuri, and something that we have talked about some in the past, but it seems more likely than ever after what has unfolded recently. And so I want to be straight with you guys. There was a lot of hype around Luffy versus Katakuri. A lot of people were excited for this fight. When it was first initially teased, a lot of people, including myself, compared it to Luffy versus Lucci. But as of now, the fight hasn't lived up to that billing. And I feel as though a lot of this has to do with how Oda decided to approach at least the beginning of the fight. This is a unique situation in which Luffy essentially has admitted that he doesn't know how he's going to beat Katakuri. So this is normally a situation in which Luffy would lose. Never in the history of One Piece, as far as I can remember, has Luffy literally spent this long trying to figure out an opponent without actually losing. So like, if I was going to compare this fight to any fight, again, I would compare it to Lucci or Crocodile, or even Enel to some extent, all characters who initially were a lot stronger than Luffy. But the progression of the actual fight has been a lot different. In the case of Crocodile, Luffy lost to Crocodile several times before compiling all the information and acquiring all the tools necessary to be able to beat him. In the case of Lucci, it was pretty similar in the sense that Lucci straight up beat Luffy, but Luffy learned something from his loss, and the next time he ended up meeting him, introduced his gears for the very first time. And even going into Enel, Luffy figured out basically what he would need to do in order to beat Enel fairly quickly. But anyway, I pretty much see this as being a reenactment of Luffy's fight versus Crocodile, with the exception that Luffy can't lose, or Oda doesn't want to let him lose. Honestly guys, Oda has had plenty of opportunities to end this fight, with Katakuri being the victor. From the very onset of the fight, Luffy's essentially been in base form dodging Katakuri, which is a bit questionable by itself. But even after this, Luffy ended up going into Gear 4th, which has a time limit. The time limit ran out, and Oda sort of tossed aside the downside of Gear 4th of being completely out of energy and unable to move. Because remember, when Gear 4th ran out in Dressrosa, Luffy had to be carried by others for several minutes. And then on top of this, gave Luffy a way out in order to power back up and be able to go into Gear 4th again by having Brule essentially watching through a mirror inside the mirror world so Luffy could take her and then do mirror world shenanigans. Despite Katakuri being stronger than Luffy, Oda is not letting Luffy lose. But on top of this, Oda is also not allowing Luffy to win. So in situations in which Luffy's not going to lose, obviously he needs to acquire something new in order to beat Katakuri. But Oda is taking his time. So essentially guys, this fight is being stalled. But it's not stalled in the interesting kind of way where you have two equals fighting. Katakuri is still stronger, so it's a stalled fight in which Luffy has to essentially be dodging for the majority of it. But anyway, I'm not really sure if I really still need to argue this or not, but it seems pretty clear that Luffy's probably not going to lose this fight. Like, if anyone really hopes that he loses, I would suppose that you'd really want Luffy to be memed for the next year. Essentially, the meme would go like this. Luffy, a picture of Luffy, I will defeat you, and then you have a picture of Katakuri essentially teabagging him. You don't drag out a loss like this. You do not spend 15 chapters setting up a fight and having Luffy essentially repeat over and over again that I will find a way to defeat you, only for it to end up as a defeat. As stated earlier, Oda has had plenty of opportunities to have Katakuri defeat Luffy and chose not to. You can look at every example of Luffy losing throughout the entirety of the story, but when Luffy loses, he loses quickly. And so with this being established, we're kind of in the waiting game now. We're waiting for Luffy to figure out what he needs to figure out in order to, in some way or another, defeat Katakuri, or at least leave the mirror world accomplishing whatever objectives and goals he has in mind. And so guys, I thought that the perfect opportunity for Oda to give Luffy this power-up was last chapter. Luffy left the mirror world. He spent several minutes outside the mirror world contemplating on what it is that he's going to do, and he came back into the mirror world, and it doesn't seem as though anything has obviously changed. Now, of course, we don't know this for sure. Luffy could have already devised some sort of plan, and it's just not obvious at this moment based on the couple pages that we got in the last chapter. But essentially what we can see, what's obvious, is that Luffy is again in base form and not capable of defeating Katakuri. It really seems as though we are still in the very same situation as we were in earlier. Luffy's still trying to figure out what it is that he wants to do. And so I really have to ask, why? Why is Oda not allowing Luffy to devise his power-up? Why is it taking so long? And my answer to this honestly kind of changes my perception of the entire fight, and how it will be perceived by the time that it's over. As I was saying earlier, a lot of us were initially comparing the potential of this fight to end up being one of the best fights in the history of One Piece. We're comparing it to Crocodile and Lucci. But when thinking about why Oda has stalled it for this long, I've sort of realized something. And obviously this is something that we considered before, but I think it's even more emphasized now. I'm starting to think that this fight is Luffy's training arc. This is Luffy, essentially, if you were to compare this to Dragon Ball Z, Luffy right now is in the hyperbolic time chamber. He's doing push-ups at 100 times gravity. And I'm starting to think that Luffy is going to be here for a while longer. But let me justify this perspective. So basically in this last chapter, there was something interesting that I and others noticed, which is that when Luffy was fighting still in base form, Katakuri was not dodging him using his observation haki. Katakuri was dodging him manually. Remember at the beginning of the fight, Katakuri was showing off. He didn't even need to move in order to dodge Luffy's punches. But that no longer seems to be the case. In addition to this, again at the beginning of this fight, Katakuri made this big deal about essentially telling us what Luffy was going to do before he did it, using his observation haki. But again, in this last chapter, he doesn't do that. And so there may be a crazy answer for this, something Luffy is doing this time that he wasn't doing before, which has completely changed the game that we don't fully understand. But I think the most obvious explanation for what's going on here is something that Luffy himself explained a couple chapters ago. I think Katakuri is legitimately running out of haki. Haki is not limitless. Luffy explained this himself, that if he wanted to, Luffy said if he wanted to, he could attempt to make Katakuri run out of haki. Brule even commented on this, basically saying, so you're not as dumb as you look. And this also relates to something else that I was talking about, which is that Katakuri never actually had his merienda. He got a couple bites in before Luffy ended up crashing it. So with Katakuri essentially using his observation haki for the entirety of the last few hours without eating, which is stated from himself is his source of energy, I think it's pretty realistic for him to be running low. And this is backed up from what we saw in the last chapter. But if this is true, then Luffy has already given us his opinion about beating Katakuri in this way. He said specifically, that wouldn't do. I want to beat Katakuri when he is at full strength. If Katakuri is running out of haki, Luffy will not be able to beat him at full strength right now. Aside from it just being garbage. Like again, this is another one of those intuitive things that you gotta be able to differentiate garbage from not garbage. But Luffy defeating Katakuri because Katakuri's haki is running out is like cheesing a boss in a game. Like you're on a boss level and you find that one part of the map in which the boss can't actually hit you. That's what that win would be like. It's so unsatisfying. Let's further this game analogy for a moment. So when you're playing a game, typically speaking, the boss levels are designed to be tough. And certainly there's many things that you could exploit in a game, glitches and all sorts of tactics and whatnot, which could help you defeat that boss easier. But in reality, what a boss stage does for you, especially one's early game that aren't like the final boss of the game, is you're supposed to fight them in order to better learn how to play the game. Even if it takes you several tries, you continue to do it until you figure it out, you get better at the game so that you can conquer the more difficult bosses later. Luffy doesn't want to cheese Katakuri. Luffy wants to get better at the game. He just wants to get stronger because the Yonko are soon and he knows it. And so guys, keeping in mind everything that I've said, that Katakuri is running out of HAKI, that Luffy said that he could beat Katakuri if he runs out of HAKI, but that he doesn't want to beat Katakuri that way, what does this all mean? What does this mean for what might happen in the future of this fight? Honestly guys, I think that Luffy might go Gear 4th, and might actually come to a point in time in which Katakuri realizes that he might lose this fight, and then Luffy will spare him. Guys, Luffy said that he will defeat Katakuri, but he's also said that he would not defeat Katakuri just by exploiting the limit of his HAKI. So if this circumstance ends up happening, honestly think that Luffy might actually let Katakuri rest, regenerate his HAKI, and maybe even have his merienda, for the sole purpose of fighting him at his full strength. And so guys, I know that a lot of you will not like this, because a lot of people, myself included, were expecting this fight to be different. But honestly, I think that it's important to speculate this, even if you do not believe me, just to prepare yourself for the possibility that this fight is less of a climactic defeat of a villain, and like I said earlier, more of just a training arc. Luffy in the hyperbolic time chamber. Luffy fighting continuously against a really strong opponent who wants to kill him so that he can progress, get stronger, get better at the game. Like, it's hard to describe why this might be different from our initial expectations, because a lot of people, even at the beginning of this, before this fight even started, considered it to be a kind of training of sorts, given that Katakuri's Devil Fruit is similar to Luffy's, that this would be the stepping stone to the Yonko. But for Oda to approach the fight like this, it's just different. Luffy's goal is no longer necessarily to defeat Katakuri. Luffy's goal then would be to obtain new power. Because if Luffy's sole goal was to beat Katakuri, it wouldn't matter which way that he did it, if that makes any sense. And I think that this could work well with the time frame that Oda has given for when the Straw Hats on the Sunny end up meeting with Sanji with the cake. I think that this fight with Katakuri might last for several hours longer. But I do want to speculate shortly here at the end of this video. If Luffy literally lets Katakuri rest for some time, maybe even have food of some kind, I'm very curious as to what will happen between them during this time. Will they have like a conversation? Will we learn something about Big Mom, the Big Mom Pirates, Yonko in general? That kind of situation, I don't think we've ever seen something like that before. But anyway guys, that's pretty much all I had to say today. As always, let me know if you agree or if you disagree and why. Just share your thoughts. Like the video if you like the video, dislike the video if you dislike the video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content. And as always guys, have a wonderful day.